Good afternoon everyone. Buon pomeriggio a tutti. L'Istituto e io personalmente siamo particolarmente lieti, felici di ritrovarci in un webinar gioiosissimo che è quello di questa sera, di questo pomeriggio, che è il terzo appuntamento organizzato con l'associazione degli scrittori italo-canadesi. Il tema è genericamente il cibo, la cucina, e l'Italia con l'Istituto Italiano di Cultura, tutta la rete diplomatica, il consolato generale e l'ambasciata d'Italia in Canada sono espressione anche di questo aspetto particolare della cultura materiale italiana. La tradizione culinaria italiana è nota nel mondo. Noi generalmente diciamo dimmi cosa mangi e ti dico chi sei, per dire che riusciamo a identificare spesso la provenienza e l'origine dei nostri interlocutori anche da questa attitudine di vita materiale. La cultura alimentare, soprattutto quella italiana, è nota anche come cultura mediterranea, come dieta mediterranea, e è basata principalmente su 3 ingredienti, certo anche l'aglio, anche garlic, ma in maniera particolare il grano, l'olio e l'uva, la vite e il vino. Poi è arrivato il pomodoro, poi è arrivato la salsa, poi è arrivato il cioccolato, è arrivata la pasticceria, però quei 3 elementi erano gli elementi essenziali. E noi questa sera celebriamo questa cultura che ha avuto una notevolissima influenza, è stata una fonte di ispirazione per l'arte, per la letteratura, per la poesia e anche per coloro che poi hanno concepito la vita materiale. Finally, I'm very, very proud of this lecture or webinar conference organized and conceived in collaboration of our Association of Italian Canadian Writers. And this is the third event completely devoted to the generally speaking, the gastronomy, but we can say, because we are in the Italian Cultural Institute, the Italian gastronomy. So my intention is to save and not to waste time. That's the reason because I invite our Giulia Verticchio, who is an Italian, arrived in Montréal in Canada in 2015, and the first experience Giulia had in our institute. Giulia studied in Rome, but shortly after in Europe, mainly in France and United Kingdom, then arrived in Canada, and nowadays is a journalist and for the association in the same time secretary on the Association of Italian Canadian Writer Executive. Take, dear Giulia, our virtual floor to present this evening or this afternoon webinar.
Grazie direttore, grazie a tutti per essere qui stasera, grazie per avermi presentata, ma appunto salviamo il tempo anziché perderlo e presentiamo l'associazione per chi non la conoscesse. So I switch on English. The Association of Italian Canadian Writers is a national no-profit organization founded 34 years ago, founded in 1986. The association brings together a community of writers, critics, academics, translators, publishers, and other artists. The association mission is to support and encourage the expression and dissemination of the Italian Canadian experience. We have about over 100 members, mainly in Italy and Canada, but even in United States and France. The members write in English, French, Italian, and dialect. In collaboration with universities and cultural organizations, the association organized a biennial conference in Canada or Italy, featuring readings, roundtable discussions, academic panels, workshops, film screenings. The conference explores new trends while maintaining a connection to the roots, to the historical past of its members, the Italian immigration and culture. Each conference usually leads to the publication of a volume. All titles are available for purchase on the Association of Italian Canadian Writers website, which has recently been renewed, and where you can find our members' profiles and photos. The association organizes activities to promote the literary works of members. Of course, this year, all the activities are on Zoom and social media. This summer, we had a discussion group called Connections, which focused on migration, family, and community. You can join us every month for 4 chiacchiere in Italiano, which allows us to speak or listen to Italian conversations. And every Thursday, we host Shut Up and Write to encourage writing within a community on Zoom. Everyone is welcome to join. Also, I would like to stress that the association is actively recruiting new members, established and emerging writers, but also supporters and donors. There's also a special membership rate for students. If anyone wants more information, we can be reached at the email info@aicw.ca. So now let's just introduce the moderator, Francesca Lodico. Francesca edited the Zagat restaurant surveys of Montreal and was the restaurant critic for Montreal's Hour. She co-created World Bites, a television series about Canadian ethnocultural traditions, and was a food columnist with CBC Radio. Her work has appeared in Pan International, Canadian Geographic, En Route, and Maisonneuve. Francesca received the Senti Writing Award and has been shortlisted for the Prism International Short Fiction Prize. Quindi lascio la parola a Francesca.
Thank you. Thank you, Giulia. Ciao, bienvenue, welcome. So, can you smell the garlic? Can you actually smell the garlic? Because I actually can smell the garlic. My kitchen is right in front of me. It's in the room next to my office. And from my desk, I can see my stove. I can see my frying pans hanging on the wall. I can see my knives, the good ones. I can see my bright green colander. I can see a Bialetti stovetop espresso maker, a really small one, a tiny one, that I got as a bomboniera. So everyone in my family has one. I can see my KitchenAid. I can see the bottle of prized Sicilian olive oil, like liquid gold. And there on the counter is the ceramic garlic pot. So even when I'm not writing about food, my kitchen is always in my line of vision. And I like that. The work of writing can be such a solitary existence, but the kitchen, it smells, the hum of the refrigerator, memories that I can actually taste in my mouth, makes me feel connected to the world. And I think that's why we're here today, to connect through stories about food. Domenico Capilongo, Monica Meneghetti, Cristina Pepe, and Jim Zucchero are going to bring us into their kitchens, some actual kitchens and some metaphoric, some writerly kitchens with food-centered stories, food-centered readings, and a discussion about Italian Canadian food culture. Let me tell you a little bit about them. Domenico Capilongo was born when rotary telephones came in multiple colors, when typewriters were used in high school, and when his earliest poems were printed on a dot matrix printer. I can still hear it. His first book of poetry, I Thought Elvis Was Italian, and Hold the Note, as well as his first book of short fiction, subtitles, came very close to winning awards and were all mailed in the post. A high school creative writing teacher and karate instructor, Domenico lives with his wife and children in Toronto. Monica Meneghetti's first book, What the Mouth Wants, a memoir of food, love, and belonging, won the By Book Award and was a Lambda Literary Award finalist. Her translation from Italian of Simone Moro's The Call of the Ice, Climbing 8,000-Meter Peaks in Winter, was a Banff Mountain Book Award finalist. She teaches writing and offers manuscript development services with a focus on supporting marginalized voices. Monica lives on unceded traditional Coast Salish territories, Vancouver. Cristina Pepe writes an art and culture blog, Un po' di Pepe, which often features Italian culinary culture and gastronomic traditions. She is a two-time winner of the Senti photo contest and a member of the AICW executive. She was born in Orsara di Puglia and immigrated to Canada with her parents as a toddler. A Vancouver-based educator and visual artist, Cristina loves to travel to Italy every year. And finally, Jim Zucchero is the co-editor of Reflections on Culture, an anthology of Italian-Canadian writing. He has published creative nonfiction and essays about the Canadian National War Memorial and Italian-Canadian writers. He is an academic counselor and teaches writing and Canadian studies at King's University College. Jim lives in London, Ontario, where he loves to cook Italian dishes for his wife and two children, walk Ringo, and play in garage bands. So now we get to the juicy part, the readings. But first of all, at any time, if you have any questions, please send them to us and we'll get to them in the discussion part. And also, before we begin, I think we should raise a glass or a cup. I think that we should salute the gods and muses that inspire us to write and cook.
Yeah.
Salute.
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 Cheers.
Okay. So now I'd like to invite Jim Zucchero to share his grocery stories with us. Jim.
Thanks very much, Francesca. I want to thank you and Francesco and Giulia and Federico and everybody who's been involved in putting this on. I really applaud your efforts. And I want to say I'm honored to be a participant on this esteemed panel. I don't know how I got here, but in such illustrious company, but it's great to be here. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I've selected a few segments to read from a piece that was published a few years ago. It's called Grocery Stories. It was published in a book called Italian Canadians at Table in 2013. And it connects to the food, Italian Canadian food theme in perhaps a different way, a different angle. So this is food not only as pleasure, but as business as well. Food as sustenance and livelihood, both. I grew up in a family that ran a corner grocery store. So we were purveyors of food as well as recipients and people who enjoyed food. The bits that I'm going to read that I've tried to connect together are sort of an orientation to give you a sense of the place, because I think location is important. A couple of descriptive episodes that I realize both deal with the feel of food. We're going to the letters M and P today for melon and peaches, and then a reminiscence of a family meal to close out my segment. So I hope these stick together reasonably well. To begin, my four siblings and I grew up in an Italian grocery store in Toronto, the one at 22 Vaughan Road, though we did not live there. Our store was located at the corner of Vaughan Road and Hawken Avenue. It was a red brick building, 2 stories, with 2 small apartments above. It opened in 1919 under my paternal grandfather's prideful eye, after he had saved up enough money from his years of peddling fruit door to door with a horse and buggy to finally buy a piece of property. Our store operated as a small family-run business on that corner for all of my youth. It kept us very busy, provided our livelihood, but more than that, it provided a way of life, many useful lessons, and a lifetime of memories. I can still clearly remember the physical layout of the store, the back room, the yard, the basement, the shed, the big walk-in coolers, such a nice place to linger on hot, humid days. Our store was located not far from the center of the city, and it attracted gourmands from the Tony districts nearby, Rosedale, Forest Hill, Wychwood Park. I can still remember being quite struck by the sight of Mrs. Morrow's enormous, curvy black Bentley parked at the curb, her chauffeur, Cooper, waiting patiently by the door while she shopped at Zucchero's. She would stand in the center of the store, survey the produce, and simply indicate what she would like and how much. Uncle Phil usually served Mrs. M, and they both enjoyed these exchanges. "Yes, Phil, I would like a honeydew melon, please, one that I can serve on Thursday evening." And the reply, "Yes, Mrs. Morrow." And then the laying on of hands would occur. No tapping, thumping, squeezing, or sniffing took place. It was pure feel. He just laid his hands on the skin and felt the melon. He was looking for a particular texture, a certain waxiness, and he knew when it was just right. No one could pick a melon like Uncle Phil. The next week, Mrs. M would return and rave about the honeydew. Her guests were so impressed. Uncle Phil would smile and silently beam. He took great pride in this special skill, and he enjoyed hearing the stories about the occasion as much as if he had been there to enjoy the melon himself. Mr. Gilchrist would come to the store on Saturday mornings in his gold Cadillac that made me think of Elvis, though he himself was nothing like Elvis. Mr. G was a very dignified elderly gentleman. I think he was in the fine ladies' wear business. He would buy 6 baskets of Ivanchuk peaches at a time, and I would place them carefully on the floor behind the front seat of his car. "I'm going up to the cottage," he would explain, "and I'd like to make some gifts to some folks up there." Sometimes he did the same thing with cherries, 6 baskets at a time. And he slipped me a buck or two for loading them into his car. I remember stacking stands high with those 6-quart baskets of peaches. The end of every basket was stamped in red ink, J. Ivanchuk and Sons, Beamsville, Ontario. Ivanchuk peaches were packed in a quite distinctive way. 1 or 2 peaches in each basket still had the green leaves attached at the stem, fresh and shiny. It was a unique and enticing visual trademark that hinted at the excellence and flavor of the fruit. It was the very finest fruit from the Niagara Escarpment. Every peach was as big as a softball and sweeter than sugar. Those peaches practically sold themselves. And even now, when I think of peaches, I can't help but also think of peach fuzz. There were days in the summer when I stacked so many peaches into neat pyramids on the stands that the peach fuzz would get onto my hand, and then it would mysteriously attach itself to any part of my skin that I touched inadvertently. And then it would start to itch, and it wouldn't stop. Every place I touched itched, and it got into your head too, so that you itched even in places you knew you hadn't touched. Those were long days, and the peaches weren't the worst of it. The hot peppers were pure murder. I'll leave that story for another occasion, perhaps. Sometimes on warm summer evenings, we would get together for a barbecue in the small yard behind the store, out back as we called it. There would be thick, juicy steaks done on the grill and sausage from Pasquale's. It had to have fennel seed, fresh salads, corn on the cob, peaches, and watermelon. In the late summer, we would admire Uncle Phil's garden, his pots of basil, each one as big around as a bushel, the ripening red tomatoes as big as your fist, and especially his prized gugutza, very long, thin vegetable marrow. The curious squash grew from thick vines strung overhead, suspended on trellises he made from thin slats of wood, recycled from vegetable crates. There were times his vegetable marrow would grow to 4 or 5 feet in length with weird twists and bends or into strange exotic shapes. We would place 1 or 2 of the best ones in the store window when we closed up for a holiday weekend, just for decoration. There was always a great deal of attention paid to how the store looked from outside. Whether we were open or not, everything had to be just so. You sold fresh fruit based first on its visual appeal. After dinner, I dipped a slice of ripe peach into my glass of wine and then swallowed it in one gulp. I thought of Uncle Phil. He used to do that. And I did come across a picture of Uncle Phil's prized guguzi. That's Jim at about 1965, as best as I can make it out. And the guguzi was a lot bigger than me. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jim. That's that's wonderful. The second photo, the one in color, when is that from? Oh, you're muted. We don't hear you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The color photo would have been, I think, the 70s, because we had converted the store from a traditional grocery store back to its original incarnation as strictly fruit and vegetables, back around the late 60s, early 70s. So the last 10 years that it operated, it was just a fruit store.
Okay, thank you. So now Monica is going to read from her book, What the Mouth Wants, a memoir of food, love, and belonging.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Benvenuti. And I wish that I had more time to read, because I would read the piece from my book that's called Da Pepe. And that's my grocery store memory of going to the Italian supermarket with my dad. And it's a very amazing memory for me, and took up a good chunk of my writing time. And but today I'm going to read one of the very opening pieces, just in addressing the themes that we were talking about, like the sentimentality that we have around things and trying to bring more dimension. And so the first piece I'm going to read is kind of more the sentimental memory, very earliest memory. And the second piece will be sort of complicating that, and maybe lead to some discussion. But the first piece is called Baby Octopus. I have to imagine the scent of garlic and ocean tempting me into the kitchen. The bright flowers of my mother's cotton house dress and olive oil pouring honey yellow into a ceramic bowl. Mom's hands grasping the twin black handles of the mezzaluna, rocking its crescent blade across garlic and fragrant herbs. Her neatly manicured fingernails smooth with clear polish. This must have happened. Did I look over the rim of the bowl? If so, she must have taken it from the countertop and lowered it to my level, bending slightly at the waist. Her fingers would have splayed against the glaze as she held the bowl within my range of view. On the outside, glaze the green of pistachio gelato. On the inside, white as latte. I'm sketching in details. Tiny fleshy creatures nestled against each other in the bowl, the reddish pink of their insensate tentacles, suckers cupping minced parsley. I deduced it was a blustery afternoon. My brother was at the school field flying a kite. Vai, diglielo, la cena è pronta, she must have said, sending me to fetch him home for supper. I would have run into the backyard, vaulted onto my bike, and pounded the pedals up the back alley to the nearby field of the Protestant school. But I do remember the joy. I remember sunshine and wind in my face, and flying toward my brother, and that long, thin cord of knowing which way was home. I remember singing, baby octopus, all the way there.
Wow.
Nutritional torture. Before my taste buds gauged the taste of tripe, I was living inside you, innocent of such Italian delicacies. Before my nose knew aroma from stench, before I had teeth to gnaw the rubbery gilled surface, before my throat could gag on the worm-like flesh, before I knew it was cow's stomach or even what cow or stomach meant, I had no need for pulling faces and you no need to admonish me for it. Non fare la smorfia, you'd say, while serving up those hideous strips stewed in tomato sauce. Trippa, more reviled than liver or tongue, more dreaded than bacala, that ram rod salt cod standing on its tail in a water bucket near the washing machine, stinking for days as it softened. Long before you locked me in the bathroom with trippa and shoved another plateful through the door when you heard the toilet flush, I was lounging in uterine brine, my face relaxed and smooth as a marinated mushroom, my guts naively willing to digest whatever you fed me. Beyond the umbilical lies tripe. Had I known, I would have spelunked to your fallopians and bribed some other ovum forth to take my place, to save my face.
Thank you, Monica. That image of lounging in uterine brine is incredible. My family in Sicily made their tomato sauce months ago, but in Montreal we did it just a few weeks ago. 10 bushels, around 190 liters of sauce. And we made some like this one. So this is a show and tell interlude. We made some like this one with eggplant, the rosa bianca, which is so gorgeous this time of year. As a writer for years, I've been documenting the making of the sauce every year with the idea that this is a ritual that will disappear with our elders. But this year, I was heartened by the fact that my little nieces were not only active participants in the making of the sauce, but that they took over the project of documenting the tradition by snapping photos and making videos. And what struck me is that their memory of the pandemic, which is going to define their generation, their kids, right, will include making 190 liters of sauce with their grandmothers. And they'll have the selfies and the TikToks and the stories as part of their archive. And I take so much comfort in that. I really do. Now, Cristina Pepe is going to also bridge the gap between past and present tradition in a very different way with her reading. Cristina, over to you.
You have to unmute, Cristina.
Sì. Grazie, Francesca, Francesco, Giulia. I'm going to read about grano arso. It's an excerpt of what was published in Italiano, volume 32. Grano arso. Italians in Canada possess a rich and varied culinary heritage. The traditions and customs around food and its preparation are an integral part of a culture, creating a connection to people and places in both the past and present. Culinary traditions are not just about providing nutrition. They are symbolic, providing memories and emotional connections, and help us define cultural identity. This is the case with grano arso, which has a history going back many centuries as part of the gastronomic tradition of peasant cooking, or cibo dei poveri, in Puglia and other regions of the south. Grano arso is literally burnt wheat. Traditionally, the stubble and bits of wheat left in the field after the harvest was burned, then plowed back into the soil. This was thought to be a quick and cheap way of clearing the fields. It was also thought to aerate and fertilize the soil and kill weeds and pests. In that short window of time between the burning and the plowing under, contadini, poor farm workers, gathered any usable charred bits of wheat. These were ground by hand into flour, farina di grano arso. It was mixed with costly white flour, making pasta and bread more affordable, and also traded to buy other foods. Used on its own, farina di grano arso created a sticky mess, described as sour and disgusting. Pasta and bread made or supplemented with grano arso were known as pasta nera and pane nero, and were considered the lowest quality of food and the absolute last resource for feeding oneself. They became a symbol of the poverty and hunger in the south of Italy during and after the war. Nowhere to be found for over half a century, today many Pugliese chefs use farina di grano arso. It has become gourmet cucina povera, used to make fresh traditional Pugliese pasta, orecchiette and cavatelli, and also bread and taralli. Burning the stubble in the fields is now illegal in the EU due to carcinogenic concerns, destruction of soil nutrients, pollution, and risk of forest fire. Today, farina di grano arso is not completely burnt. It is commercially toasted, similar to the roasting of coffee beans. Most of the gluten is burnt off, so it will not hold together if used alone. For best results, 10 to 25% farina di grano arso is added to other gluten-containing flours. The flavor, texture, and smell of pasta or bread made with farina di grano arso are intense and unique. And the color can range from gray to brown depending on the percentage of flour used. The flour itself is slightly grainy and gray, resembling ashes. The smoked nutty flavor reminds me of toasted hazelnuts, and the smell of slightly charred brick oven pizza crust. Just how I like it. Dried grano arso is often available online, although the flour is harder to find outside of Italy. Durum wheat semola can be toasted in the oven on a baking tray lined with parchment paper for 30 minutes, but is guaranteed to set off the smoke detector. The safer option is to visit Puglia and try grano arso in its natural environment. Not everyone is embracing the return of grano arso to the kitchen. It disappeared because it was un ricordo della miseria, a reminder of poverty and the shame associated with it. This is something that most Italians who lived through the war do not want to be reminded of. When I made bread with grano arso to photograph for an article, I brought it to my parents' house. Papa made a poker face and said, "Solo che vedo questo pane mi viene la paura." Just looking at this bread brings on fear. I think he was kidding. He did eat some anyway. Now you have a better understanding of why Nonna will only eat white bread. Born of an ancient contadino tradition, today grano arso is important in a historical, social, and cultural context. It is not merely a reminder of la miseria. Grano arso symbolizes a part of our heritage that is important for everyone of Italian descent to remember: the resilience and instinct to survive of the humble contadini who were our ancestors. Grazie. I have some show and tell here. I don't know if you can see this. This is farina di grano arso, so it looks like ashes. This is dough made with 25% farina di grano arso, so it looks like a lump of clay. And these are some orecchiette and cavatelli made with grano arso. You can see the color. I wish you could smell them. There was a photo of the burning of the field, but
oh, let me try again. I thought I shared it, but I guess I didn't. I'm gonna try right now. Share screen. Oh, no, what am I sharing?
La ristocha.
Can you see it?
No.
Oh, I don't seem to be able to do it.
Oh, that's okay. It was a photo of the wheat fields being burned that I took in the 90s.
Okay, sorry about that. I'll see if I can figure it out, and I'll show it afterwards during the discussion. Thank you, Monica. Are you going to have those for dinner?
Francesca,
yeah.
I have the photo. I can just,
okay.
There it is.
And they would set whole fields on fire, right? With
Yes.
the stubble? Yeah.
And it's been illegal since the 90s, but a few people were still doing it.
Wow. Thank you. So now Domenico Capilongo is going to read next.
Hello, grazie, benvenuti a tutti, saluto a tutti e grazie per questo momento che siamo qui insieme e penso che con tutto questo parlare di mangiare possiamo combattere meglio questo virus. This will be our way out of the COVID by eating. We will eat our way out. I'm going to share with you 4 poems. Can everyone hear me? Everyone's okay? The first poem is called Muskoka Pasta, and I went on vacation with our 2 little boys, and when we arrived to the hotel, the power was out. So it's called Muskoka Pasta. The back seat, a rotini of laughter as we cut through the Parmigiano snow, carving deeper into the winter afternoon. The tortellini moon creeping in the rear view. The power's out in the hotel. We stumble through the cannelloni hallway like overcooked linguini. The 4 of us cuddle in the ravioli bed, in lasagna layers of pajamas, telling stories of minestrone superheroes until the gnocchi light bulbs pop back on. The other poem is about al dente. It's so difficult to describe to people che vuol dire questa parola, questa frase al dente. E per me è una metafora. It's a metaphor, this al dente moment. Al dente, the perfect moment, not the overcooked, soggy feeling in the back of your throat when you don't know what to say. Like on the first date, when I told you that I don't believe in marriage. The perfect light, the sun sitting just right, just so, holding them for the first time, the hospital room spinning, the firmness of that moment, the words forming nicely in your mouth like they were meant to be there, like now, years later, when I tell you that you heard me all wrong. I know you don't believe me. And 2 more poems. My new poetry project is about words that were added to the dictionary the year I was born. So I challenge you to, you can go to the website Merriam-Webster Dictionary, and there's a little tab on the top called Time Traveler. And if you click on it and type in the year of your birth, like Jim Zucchero was born in 1991, so he's pretty young. And no, I'm kidding. And all the words that were added in the dictionary the year you were born are there. So I took each word and wrote a poem for each word. And they have to do with food. So this word, it starts with the word and the definition, and then the memory of my childhood that connects to that word. So this one is a polypoprotein. The definition is a protein that combines with a lipid to form lipoprotein, often used with a letter or letter and number. And here's the poem. Working together, the family, the community, with this one simple purpose, combining all of it in the dark, damp basement, open garage or closed garage, so the neighbors couldn't watch, couldn't see the secrets, the method, me playing in the corner on a tricycle or big wheel, the neighbor kids had a green machine with parents or aunts and uncles, older cousins, the casings held firm, the feeding of the grinder, the deep red of raw meat, its squish sound pushed between fingers of tightly clenched fists. We've got to mention the butcher's name over and over, the deal we got, better than the family down the street, like some incantation, Don't push too hard, move too fast, keep your fingers, your hands clean. Don't kick up the dust. Come on, let's go. Don't want to be here all night. The room, slow motion, stop motion even. Just watching, felt like some kind of help. I could taste it. And finally, this is a word in the dictionary the year I was born, masa harina, which means a flour made from dried masa. And it reminded me of this memory. Making pasta from scratch, more magical than the priest at mass. The table cleared, a mountain of snow-white flour. Delicately, a mound was formed, fingers guiding the edge of an Etna-like crater. Ready for sunny yolks to be cracked in, pooling up in the center, my fingers reaching, I was pushed aside in puffs of flour, the dough mixed, kneaded, and rolling out thinly. Through a crack in the door, the stainless steel, hand-cranked pasta machine, like a secret behind the wizard's curtain. Nonna's fingers rolled a small batch of gnocchi, looked at me slyly, and winked. Grazie.
Grazie.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim, Monica, Christina, and Dom. Should we have another chin-chin very quickly?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. Now remember that if you have questions, please send them to us, and I'll get the ball rolling. I have a question for Christina. Your article offers a capsule history of La Miseria del Sud, and grano arso is this perfect example of cibo dei poveri that's become a highly prized gourmet item, but our elders, your dad, your nonna, can't fully embrace this, understandably. How do you navigate that tension when you write about food, the tension between a painful past and a present world that embraces your culinary heritage and recasts it as something precious and beautiful?
Well, there's definitely a generation gap a little bit, but many Italian traditions evolve from a place of food insecurity and necessity. And I like to, when I write about stuff like that, I like to talk about the negative and acknowledge it, but then focus on the positive. And I think that's what most people are trying to do now. My papa does eat pasta grano arso. He pretends he's afraid of it, but he does eat it. I think our nonna's refusing to eat brown bread. I think that's something that's not going to change.
But you made headway with your dad.
I did, yes, because the thing is, when they ate it, they used more than 25%. Yeah. So it was awful. It was a sticky mess. But if you keep it to a maximum of 25% of the flour being grano arso, it actually tastes quite good. Mm-hmm. It's very unique, and that's why it's actually quite prized in the gourmet circles in Puglia.
Jim, your grocery stories are so rich in detail that listening to you is like opening up a time capsule. And you, I don't know about the rest of me, but you filled me with so much nostalgia and longing, because your dad is my dad, your Uncle Phil is my zio Totò. And in this way, it feels like your grocery stories belong to the collective memory of Italian Canadians. What role do you think food plays in our Italian Canadian collective memory, and why is it important for you to write about this personal history?
Yeah, I think food plays a huge part in connecting us with our history. I mean, it's a touchstone to our past, and it's also a marker, of where we've come from. So, as Christina pointed out, the memories of hard times when things weren't available. I think another aspect of it is that it is both a symbol of our connection with our past and our creativity. That when people emigrated and they couldn't get certain food items that they cherished, they found substitutes, or they learned to grow those things here when they weren't readily available. And in kind of following that thread, Francesca, I did some research on the history of Italian grocers because it's something of interest to me personally. I was astonished to realize the extent to which Italian grocers for 100 years have shaped the grocery experience that we know today by introducing new food items that were considered exotic until Italian grocers brought them in and introduced them to the Canadian public. And I would dare say the same thing has happened on the restaurant side. Food that was once marginalized, you know, it was an object of ridicule if you turned up with a greasy pepper and sausage sandwich. Now you go to a snazzy cafe to order those things and they're prized, right? Pasta, pizza have become part of mainstream Canadian food culture. But that's as a result of Canadian grocers, you know, working at introducing those items, and Canadian restaurateurs creating opportunities for people to come to know and enjoy those items. So the extent to which Italians have shaped food culture in Canada is astonishing and sometimes not fully appreciated as it should be.
But I think that's part of what is so interesting about writing, about the writing that you guys do, is that that's a part of being witness and having the record, because I don't think that, for example, what you described is extremely well known, right? And I think we, you know, today we're focused on Italian Canadian writing, but part of what you're describing, I think, is this idea that, well, when does Italian Canadian culture become Canadian, right? Like where, like we keep making that distinction, but what you're describing is part of Canadian culture. And there's almost an invisibility to the contributions that those previous generations of immigrants made.
I think you're right. I think those things have very gradually kind of made their way in, and it's kind of like the frog in the pot. You know, the temperature rises so slowly that it never jumps out, but it's there. I mean, if you choose to examine it closely, that impact is there. I have a cousin who is a third generation grocery store manager, and I visited with him and his store, and it was astonishing to me to hear him tell stories about the connections he has with his customers. And it just reminded me of my own past and the relationships that my father and my Uncle Phil had with their customers, you know. So it's a personal thing, it's a business thing, it's all those things rolled into one. That's beautiful.
It is beautiful. Now, Monica, your writing is, it's tactile, and it engages all of the senses and compels the reader, at least this reader, to reflect on these iconic markers of Italianità that are so often portrayed somewhat sentimentally and stereotypically. So la mamma, the cooking of Italian delicacies. What's it like to write against that sentimentality? I mean, is that part of what you're doing, or am I making assumptions?
Well, it's definitely part of what I'm doing. In general, in the book, I think I'm writing somewhat against what's considered to be Italian tradition, and sort of reinventing, particularly the concept of family, which is, you know, quite a sacred cow. And so that's been definitely challenging. I think it's very difficult when you're remembering things from your childhood not to be sentimental, if you have good memories. And it's also hard not to be really, really harsh if you have bad memories. And so for me, in the process of writing the memoir, I was really coming to terms with a lot of things in my past. And actually was quite disconnected from Italian culture before I wrote this. I kind of almost deliberately was, distancing myself from Italian culture for numerous reasons. And I think by kind of dousing these memories, I kind of became more connected. And I remember the first reading I did, it was a Books and Biscotti in Edmonton, Alberta. and it was at a community center, I think. And there were a bunch of Italians in the audience, and it was my first time kind of sharing my writing with Italians. Like I said, I'm very isolated from the community for a long time. And when I shared my piece about uovo sbattuto and had people reacting with tears and coming up and sharing their stories after about their own memories on that food, that's when I realized that I had kind of made a connection. It may sound very strange, but from the vantage point of my isolation from the community, it didn't actually occur to me that someone else might have those same emotions about the same food. And so I'm moved again today to hear about the granarzo and the reaction to the brown bread, because that was so much a part of my growing up, of like my sister, you know, hitting teen years and deciding it was time for like whole wheat bread and we're going to do all this healthy stuff. And my mother was just like, we can't have that in the house, you know. It's like we all, and I didn't, my disconnection from this community has been very profound. And I realize that every time I connect with you, I realize that there's all these things that I didn't know we had in common. I knew it was part of my culture, but I didn't actually hear anybody else talk about it. I don't know if I've answered your question. I kind of went off on a tangent there, but definitely sentimentality is something that is, you know, hooked into nostalgia, and trying to have a balanced view in life is always a challenge for me because I'm a person of extremes. So,
well, all hail extremes then. I mean, because I think also the trajectory that you describe is the sort of disconnecting and then coming back in, you know, but on your terms, and through this unexpected thing. Food is something. It could be food, it could be something else, but I think it's a trajectory that a lot of us have experienced. But it's interesting that with you it happened with food, or writing about food.
Yes, and I actually, you know, to bring a little critical perspective to it, I could say that, you know, food is my primary connection to Italian culture. And I believe that that is because of being queer and not having a traditional lifestyle. And so it's been very, very difficult for me to actually feel like I'm part of the culture, because so much of who I am goes against what a lot of Italian traditional culture says Italians are. And so it's been difficult for me to find a place of belonging, but food doesn't do that. You know, everybody eats. It doesn't matter, you know, who they love or where they live or what color their skin is. It's this amazing leveler of where we can connect with each other's humanity. And so I think this is like, if I was to do a critical analysis, I would be like, well, this is why this book helped me connect to my Italianness, la mia italianità, you know, because I now can find a place to belong. And actually the piece in the book called Da Pepe, which is about going to the Italian supermarket, which I didn't know was called the Italian supermarket. We just call it Pepe's, right? Because he was the man who owned the store. You know, that piece is a lot about trying to feel like I belong, you know, and that's a huge struggle for me in many, many areas of society, but specifically within the Italian community, because I think a lot of who I am just really challenges people. And that has not been easy. No, that hasn't been easy.
Well, thanks for sharing with us. I'm thinking of Domenico's poems, which are so well. I'm thinking of the first one, which was so irreverent and playful, and I'm thinking about how then you take these words in the dictionary and you connect them to food and then to pasta making. And I'm wondering, and this touches on all of you, I'm wondering, is the connection to ethnicity and Italian-Canadian identity more pronounced when you write about food versus other subjects? This is for Domenico, I was thinking, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Monica. And welcome to this community, Monica.
Thank you.
But yeah, I think so. You know, I mean, I guess our connection is with food. You know, the cliche is that, you know, it's hard to talk about feelings in any kind of family. Doesn't matter your background. So we will put our love in the meal and the communal moment of all of us eating together and the connection of the food and what it represents for us. So yeah, when I write about my childhood and food appears, I think it's a reconnection with identity, but also a very unique identity because it's the immigrant identity. If you go to Italy, I remember visiting Italy as a child and my cousin hiding the ketchup because, you know, the Canadian immigrants had froze this 1950s Italy. This is what it is. Meanwhile, the Italians are modernizing in Italy and they're having ketchup and processed food. So it's a very, you know, very interesting, complex topic about identity, our connection to ourselves, our connection to who we are, who we were tried to be formed to be. You know, you don't eat what the Canadese eat, you eat what we put, because who knows what they put in the jars of food. So yes, I guess to answer your question, yes, I think when we write about our childhood memory of immigrant Italian Canadian food, it connects me to that formative identity, I think, that they were trying to create.
Well, it's interesting. Oh, I think, are we close to the end? Do we have time for some questions from participants?
Yeah.
Okay. While Julia's looking at those questions, I'm just wondering about ethnicity. Like, do we still need to talk about it? Because it you know, within Canada, Italian food and Italian Canadian culture is not viewed as ethnic as it was, let's say, 10 years ago, right? Compared to other immigrant groups, except that I still feel like it is. For the most part, not really, not always, but sometimes, like, there isn't this clean break between being ethnic and not being ethnic anymore. So what does this mean to you? It's just, anybody can jump in.
Yeah, this is a question from the audience because we have explicitly something like that. Like, I'm curious about the cross-cultural or intercultural dimension of food. Everything that has been described is strongly connected to Italianness, but I wonder if the writers have shared this writing with people from other cultures and what the reactions have been. Is this an Italian experience or a human experience?
Domenico?
Yeah, I was thinking about this too. And, you know, when you share it with people, you say, oh, my Polish family used to make this when they first came, or even people from China making homemade dumplings. I think it's a human universal, maybe immigrant experience. You're trying to define yourself in this place, and food is the best way to do it. And like Jim said, you know, when you can't find that ingredients, you have to find the substitute. So every immigrant group will say, when we first came, we couldn't find spices to make our curry, or we couldn't find the texture of rice that we like. And so I think it's universal. It's a universal experience. I lived in Japan for a couple of years, and when I had lots of hair in my 20s, and you could even see when you're taken out of your comfort zone and you're an expatriate, the people are, oh, we got to get peanut butter. We've got to find peanut butter. Suddenly food defines who you are. So I think it's universal.
Yeah, I would concur, Dom. I think that's part of the reason why food and writing about food is such a powerful thing, because on one hand, it is universal. We all have to eat to survive. Yeah. It's also something very particular. We all do it differently from region to region. Like, you know, you've got a certain snobbishness, right? Oh, well, in our village, we do it this way. We got it right. The rest of them, they got it wrong, you know? And that's from home to home, from village to village, from country to country. It's very particular, right? But it's also universal. It's multisensual. You know, food is visual, it feels, it tastes, it even sounds, you know, the thump of a melon, the pop of a pepper, you know, it encompasses all the senses. And I think it's complex, you know, it can be mundane. We do it every day, but we also associate food with really special occasions that stick in our memory, right? The meal we had at the closing banquet of the conference in Italy in 2010. I'll never forget it. It is indelibly impressed in my mind, to the point that we joked about it. We said, somebody's got to write a poem about this, right? So food is such a powerful thing that if we take the time to explore it, you can mine that for a lot of things. And to Monica's point, there is a lot of really good writing about the negative side, you know, about we all celebrate the wonderful things about Italian food, but we know there's a dark side to this too. And some writers in our own community have written about that in powerful ways. So I would encourage you, as you embrace this community and we embrace you, Monica, find those pieces. Michelle Alfano, Darlene Madot writing about olives, and there are so many great episodes of people who have struggled with the tensions around food and what it means to them and our community.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there and add that, you know, I was in my 30s before I realized food was nutrition, because, you know, it was everything else first. And when I started having issues with different food sensitivities, and also, you know, got into a situation where I was eating alone a lot, was actually after I wrote the book. And I realized how often I was overeating. I was eating when I wasn't hungry. I was eating more than I needed to because it was being pushed on me. And so I realized through eating alone, through this vast net of loneliness that brought me, because I really wanted to have that sit down around the table family meal, and it just wasn't practical to have that happen with my family. And so I was eating alone and feeling that intense missing of the dining experience. Well, that's, you know, okay, COVID has added a whole other layer to that. But, you know, I realized as I was eating alone, oh, I actually am a lot healthier if I eat alone. And that's a really big tension for me, because my heart's just like, every time I sit down to eat alone, I feel this loss and longing at the same time as I can acknowledge that, you know, come home, first thing that happens is, you know, the parents would comment on whether or not I'd gained or lost weight. In the same breath, they'd be forcing food on you. And at one time I actually said to my father, like, do you understand, like, the connection between what you said to me when I came in the door and what's happening now at the table? Do you understand? Like, I don't think you get it. And he was just like, oh, okay, I'm never going to say that again. So it's interesting because it is very, very romanticized. And yet there's a lot of negative things that I have experienced with it. And now that I'm more aware, it's great because I sit down to have a meal and I've kind of like processed all that, and now I can appreciate it for what it is.
Monica, there's a question for you. Can you talk a bit about how you see the link between food and queer identity eventually? Boom.
Wow, you're really giving me a run for my money here. Let me see. Well, let's see. We'll just start by saying, because not all listeners may know this, but the word queer is actually a reclaimed slur. It's a word that was used historically to disparage people who were not heterosexual. And it's been reclaimed by our community to call ourselves, and with pride. And in my mind, queer identity is about questioning. It's about pushing boundaries. It's about critically thinking about what society has told us and what religion has told us, and actually coming to an ethical and heartfelt and, you know, thought out path forward in life. And insofar as that is true, it's at odds with traditional. It's at odds with traditional culture. And unless the culture continues to evolve, as it does back in Italy, it does evolve, you know, but necessarily not happening in the diasporas, where people are clinging to what they remember of their traditions and they don't want to evolve because that's their connection back to their past. And so I've actually found like Italians that are living in Italy to be more open-minded than the Italians that are living in Canada. Not always, and that's a gross generalization, but that's anecdotally, I can say that's been true. And so where that comes in with food is that we question the food. So it's like, okay, how am I eating? What am I eating? And how can I continue to hold to my values that I have absorbed through my cultural upbringing without actually perpetuating things that are actually homophobic or racist or, you know, going against things like food sovereignty. So like, for example, I wound up in a relationship long-term with a chef. And like right now, you know, she's got an Instagram called Apocalypse Kitchen, where she's imagining what food is going to be like after the apocalypse. And she does things like harvest acorns and grind them into flour. She's right now got prune sliced up and dehydrating on the dashboard of her car because it's hot in there and it's actually ideal for dehydrating fruit. So the food value is there. Food is an obsession in my household, as you can see, like Tiny Chef back here. If anybody doesn't know the Tiny Chef show, you got to check it out. That was painted by my partner, who does paint by numbers. And like, food is just a huge deal in our house, but I don't make Italian food. I don't necessarily hold to those food traditions in the specifics, but the value that's placed on food, the importance of it, the attention to it, the beauty and the love and the care that one puts into eating well every day, and the flavor, that's all still there. But it's not necessarily pasta. It's not necessarily, you know, anything recognizably Italian, but the underpinning of the way that I approach food is still very Italian.
Thank you. Monica, from the audience, others, really deeply thank you for your share. It's important for everyone. We have a practical question for Cristina. Where can we get some grano arso? Where is it?
Well, dried, it's not easy to find. Yeah. Even in Italy, it's not easy to find, but you know, you can get farina di grano arso at the supermarket in Italy, in the south anyway, and you can find it online, but I can't imagine, you know, getting a bag of flour shipped. It just it would take forever to get here, but it is available online. And dried pasta, sometimes they sell it on Amazon, the dried pasta made with grano arso.
Yeah.
And I know there's one chef in New York who toasts it himself, but you know, I've tried that and it's pretty dangerous. The smoking point, you have to get it to a smoking point, so it's not really something I would recommend.
Someone else asked if you can show again the photo from the book, probably.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because thank you.
This is the photo. Can you see it?
Thank you. Yeah.
It's very dramatic to see fields.
Yeah.
Like
we have from the audience, if we have a few minutes, Direttore,
yeah,
non so.
Absolutely, yes. I think the discussion is the food of the culture.
Yeah, in the end, the dulcis in fundo, noi diciamo, no? Sharing bread or any food can be a spiritual experience. Dominic has just touched on that. I'm also thinking of the theme of food in Frank Paci's Black Madonna and how the daughter rejected. Is there any other book you have enjoyed with Italian food themes? I think, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, one that's coming to mind is Nino Ricci's Lives of the Saints series. Food appears a lot in there. And it was turned into a mini series with Sophia Loren. And there's a famous scene in the mini series where they put polenta on a piece of wood at the table. So the polenta is hot and it's cooling, and then everyone's taking pieces from it. But yeah, if you go to the Association of Italian Canadian Writers website, if you look at each person's writing, I would guarantee food appears in everyone's writing. So yeah, I would say Lives of the Saints is coming to mind right now.
That's so funny because, you know, before I wrote this book, What the Mouth Wants, I used to say, oh, you know, that's just a stereotype, you know, this thing about Italians and food. Like, I just would dismiss it, and I thought it was just ridiculous. And then I found myself writing this entire memoir that was brought up by food memories and realizing how deeply connected I was to it, and realized it wasn't actually all that, you know, maybe it was a stereotype for a reason, and that there was room for stretching the stereotype. But as far as other food books in Italian, I have to say, like, I'm really glad this question was asked, because I feel like I'm such a newbie in terms of really getting on board with Italian culture. I'm really learning a lot from what everybody's sharing, because it's helping me feel less isolated, and it's helping me you know, sort of realize there's a lot of stuff I'm behind on reading. And I knew of the Lives of the Saints, but I'm really eager to hear if there's any other suggestions.
I can offer a couple. Penny Petrone has written about food and the associations of food with culture and ethnicity, and how that cuts both ways. And in terms, for anybody who's interested in reading about Italians reflecting on the place of food in Italian Canadian culture, I couldn't make a better recommendation than Italian Canadians at Table, this book. It was published in 2013. There you go. It's a million seller. You know, there are a million of them in the cellar, and they're just waiting to get shipped out. So anybody who's interested in delving into images and memories of Italian Canadians and their associations with food, and they're not all positive. There are, you know, Joseph Pivato and Emma, his wife, talk about the turkey wars, you know, in families where there are different cultures coming together. You know, the presence of Italian food at feasts can be a point of tension, right? Or people who emigrate back to Italy and try to create a traditional Canadian Thanksgiving. Well, just try and find those food items in Italy in October, right? So it's such a multifaceted topic, and there is no end to the fascination of the way people have embraced it and written about it in really powerful ways, I think.
Yeah, about that, Diego Caraffini, ci dice, from me and my wife Valentina to all, what do you think about the manual aspect of preparing the food itself? To us, it is a large part of the culinary experience with a ritualistic vibe. Do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
a tactile part of cooking, and it affects all your senses. So to me, that's an important part of cooking, is the process and going through the process.
Yeah.
How different or similar is it to writing, the process of cooking? Because they're seemingly
quite similar.
I think it's very different, because when you're cooking, once you add that salt, you can't take it out. with writing,
There's no delete.
the wonders of word processing, we can edit until the cows come home. So we're lucky in that way. I would also point out to that last point about, slow and the manual and appreciating the preparation. The slow food movement, which is a rejection of fast food, began and is centered in Italy, in a place where we take our food seriously, where it's not just sustenance, it's about the ritual, the coming together, the hospitality of sharing food, and how that fosters important relationships and the development of relationships. So absolutely, it's important to slow down and appreciate the method, not just the process, not just the product, I think.
Yeah, I agree, because I think the slow food is the sign of the philosophy, is a philosophy of a material life. And as you stressed, the gastronomy is not exclusively an aspect of material life, but this is the mirror of the life of the society, of the civilization, of the human beings. That's the reason I think analyzing and reflecting on food, on this human habitude is so important, because it's essential for the life. And so we need, we have to be being in real connections with this aspects of natural life.
If I could just go back to that whole idea about ethnicity that was raised earlier, about like, should we still be talking about ethnicity? I really think it's important for us to think about what we think our culture is, because, for example, something most people associate with Italian culture, which is the tomato, is actually brought to us through colonization. It's from South America. So we've got a culture that has created an entire culture that is completely identified with Italianness, and yet those ingredients are actually appropriated from another culture. So because in Canada we're going through this process of reconciliation with Indigenous people, I think it's very important for us to acknowledge that, some of the things that we consider to be the cornerstones of Italian cultural foods are actually not ours originally. And what does that mean? For me, it's very rich. It's a very rich area to explore.
Well, it's very interesting, because one of the questions I had for the panel actually is what does the future of Italian Canadian food culture look like? And I think that, and there are easy answers to that, but I think that where it gets really interesting is to actually question things, right? It's like, what is Canadian food culture? I think it's impossible to answer the question, but I think it is possible to deconstruct it, to pull it apart. And we can't just be writing about the same things over and over again. I think that's where we get stuck in this kind of, we get stuck in the sentimentality and nostalgia corner, right? Where it gets interesting is where we pull things apart a little bit or a lot. And that's where you're getting at as well, Monica. And there's so many different ways to do that as well. And I'm also curious to see what happens with, I don't want to sound ageist here. We're in the prime of our lives, but I think what the kids are doing, is incredible, and I'm curious to see whether it's in academia or even just in the arts, what it's going to look like. Yeah,
we have other considerations other than questions from the audience, like Joseph Pivato, salutiamo, in Edmonton, ci dice, I have not questioned, just a thank you to all the readers who reminded me of polenta as the cucina povera we escaped when we left Italy in 1952. Monica, I remember your reading in Edmonton, grazie. So then we have a suggestion. As a follow-up for the event, it would be great to receive a curated list of reading suggestions from each presenter. Make a list of all the books that are being mentioned and more. So you can send it to send them to info@aicw.ca, and then we share the message.
Okay. Shall we take that on?
But in a few days, like.
Okay, yes, time, yes. Give us a few days at least.
Yeah, not right now.
No, but it is a wonderful, I mean, that's the other thing too, is this sense of, I mean, this is how we build community or connect to people, right? And I think putting together a list like that is a wonderful thing to do. Yeah, and I'm curious to see, I mean, I'm curious to see what we come up with.
Yeah, we have another like comment. Thank you all. This was really a treat. Jim, I remember your stories from a reading you gave at the Columbus Center. Mm-hmm. Better yet, we lived for many years near St. Clair West. Now we lived way over on the west side of Toronto, formerly Etobicoke. The hardest part of the move is being detached from the stores where I could find everything I need to keep on cooking what we love.
Thank you.
We have congratulations for the panelists from Connie Guzzo. We have a comment from our Delia De Santis, a milestone of the Association of Italian Canadian Writers. She said, yesterday, I made pasta carbonara for my son and family. My son came over today to have it warmed up for lunch. And I remember thinking about how much Parmigiano cheese went in it. And we talk about how much Parmigiano is used all over us in Canada. And my son said, yes, sale e pepe and Parmigiano is something everyone in America has. Sì. Abbiamo un ringraziamento e i saluti da parte della nostra signora Console Generale Silvia Costantini che ci ha seguito. Grazie mille, quindi la salutiamo.
Ciao.
Valerie Curru-Kayak. She scrive, thank you all for sharing your work and moving memories on the topic of food. One of the most important food-related rituals in Italian culture is, without a doubt, coffee. Taking a look at how it is practiced and experienced in Italy versus in North America is very rich in symbolism and telling of way of life in each place. I'm curious to hear from panel participants about their thoughts on this. For me, il caffè espresso is definitely a ritual that is more than just about a beverage and is part not only of my daily routine connecting me to my roots, but also part of my artistic practice when I write or create. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to dive in because I, in What the Mouth Wants, I actually have a piece in it called Caffè Latte. And it is about that. It's about my nostalgia for caffè latte and sort of not being able to drink milk anymore, not being able to have coffee anymore. How do I keep connected to this caffè latte thing that I've been doing since I was a child? And so that piece is about, you know, how to reinvent the caffè latte for myself. And also the pot that we used to heat the milk in, I kept it. I still have it from, 40 years ago when I was a kid. I have kept those pots because they have there's a tactile worn-ness to the handles. And, you know, just the memory of heating that milk up on the stovetop and putting in Nescafe. That was what we did as kids. We didn't have, back in Calgary when I was a child, there was no, you know, gaja machine on the street corner at the cafe. And they weren't even selling them. So we had our little stovetop bialetti, but we also just, you know, heated milk up on the stove and put coffee, Nescafe, like instant coffee in it. And, you know, then later on came the microwave, and then we would just heat it up in the mug. And, you know, these things were all kind of steps away from the traditional way of making the cafe latte. To the extreme end was when I had to stop drinking coffee because my stomach wouldn't tolerate it. And so I was using finely ground rooibos tea and soy milk. And it was sort of, it's just, you know, these reinventions that we do because we just want to cling to those traditions or those memories, those connections. So absolutely, like those ritual aspects of consuming, you know, I think this is one of the most powerful anchoring things about food. We have to do it every, you know, several times, if not more, per day. And it just keeps us coming back and reconnecting to our bodies and our physicality in a way that I think is very grounding, especially in COVID times where, you know, being in our heads and worrying is really counterproductive. And just grounding in the body is so important for our well-being.
Monica, they suggest, what about using orzo?
I can't have sugar either. And I can't have wheat, and I can't eat cheese. And a while there, I couldn't have tomatoes either. So,
Francesca, I have a coffee story. If you want coffee and ritual, it's slightly embarrassing, but I'll give you the brief version. A number of years ago, my wife and I were traveling in Italy. We were in Sicily. The last part of our journey before we returned to Canada, we were in Trapani. And I had parked my car where the fella had told me, davanti al porto, right in front of the door. We got up in the morning, our car was gone. No, it was supposed to be davanti al porto, down at the port, not in front of the door. Okay. So we tracked down our car. We had to pay to get it out of Hawk, and the guy wanted more money than I had. It was the last day we were there. So I paid him everything I had except for a couple thousand lira. It was still lira at the time. When we got to the airport, I bought us 2 coffees, 2 good espressos, and 2 cornetti, the last good coffee we would have for a long time. My wife said, I thought you gave the guy all the money you had. I said, well, I had to have enough for a coffee before we leave, right? When we got back, we arrived in the middle of the night. We went to a Tim Hortons before we drove back from Toronto to London. When we took the first sip of a Tim Hortons coffee, we both looked at each other and said, what is this? Who could drink this? So the things we become accustomed to here, we settle for a pale imitation of what we know and love from the Italian culinary tradition.
And you had those coffees at the airport standing up.
We did indeed. You don't want to sit down; they'll charge you twice as much.
Exactly.
We have, sorry, Francesca, we have a message from Trina Costantini Powell, the president of the National Congress of Italian Canadians, Ottawa District. This has been very entertaining and informative, giving me great ideas for a future activity. So we're proud of it. Katerina Edwards, Monica, when I was a child in Calgary, my mother would buy green beans and roast them in the oven. We certainly didn't have in Calgary what was available in Toronto or Montreal. And I think we covered more or less the questions from the audience. I don't know if any of you want to add something else.
I would add one thing, actually. Before we were talking about how the traditions, a lot of the traditions become kind of frozen within the diaspora, but how in Italy, it's much more progressive when it comes to a lot of things, but also when it comes to food traditions. And we're talking about the, I was thinking about how that's not the case everywhere, though, with food traditions. I think about going to a place like Milano, where, in fact, I was there in the fall, and my cousin was so excited to take me to this shiny new mall and to take me to the Mexican restaurant. So there is, there is change, I would say, in Italy as well, and even in the South. I mean, you have supermarkets now and so on, but so there's that. And then the other thing that I'm curious about as well in Canada, we're talking about Italian-Canadian food culture, is that, in the last 10 years or so, we've seen a new influx of immigrants. And Giulia is is an example, is part of that group. And I wonder what these newcomers are going to bring with them, or how they're going to mix things up. For Italian food, well, Italian Canadian culture in general, but in particular the food culture here.
But if I can say something about that, it's that for us it's so much easier than for others before, so that except this period with the COVID-19, so borders closed and we can't fly home as much as we want. Usually, I don't know, me, my friends, the other newcomers, so we come back quite often for Christmas, for summer. So yes, I use Verticchio, I use Milano. Now I'm making like ads for publicity, but I don't know. Yes, I used to go to grocery stores to find Italian food as much as is possible, but I'm lucky enough to come back home quite often. So it's not like, I don't know, immigrants who came in with the boat and used to ride letters to the family, and they could fly sometimes just after 30 years that they were already here. So for us, we really have always a bridge with Italy. So it's like if I give up to eat somehow here, it's not a problem, because when I back home for Christmas, when I back home for summer, I eat my fish, my fresh seafood, I eat what my mom cooks for me, and fruits and vegetables with another taste. So it's I think less tragic than how it used to be. I can feel that I'm very lucky, because I can still enjoy the Italian side of the fact that I'm a newcomer from Italy. So my family is there, and I can take a flight to come back home when I want, and enjoy the Canadian part of my life, like for work, for study, for the quality of life, for how we feel safe here, and so on. But the relationship with food is a kind of sad, because okay, when I try to eat vegetables and fruits here, it's really a sad experience. Like I can't do it. I really don't like them. So that I cook always pasta and beef. Beef is good here, quite good. So I'm eating so much beef because it's the only thing very good, very tasty here. But about I don't know, even when you make the sauce, the ingredients that you can find here are not the same. So you can try, but there's always something's not working. Like so it's a sometimes I think that it's even a waste of time. Like, I don't want to do it here. Sorry, but And it's because twice a year, 3 times a year, I can come back home. So this is another part of my life. Like, okay, when I'm back home, I enjoy food, and I enjoy the tastes, and I enjoy cooking in another way. So this is something that I think we agree that the other newcomers from Italy, like fresh, just arrived Italians, that I think they share these thoughts with me, because when we think about it, when we talk about it, it's a kind of, you know, it's not a big story. We take an airplane and we back home, and we know that we can eat better there. So
better there. Ah!
Well, I have to say, in Vancouver,
very honest.
Lucky.
Finally.
I totally agree with you, Julia.
Yeah.
But whenever I say that to anyone, they say, "Oh, you're just being a snob." But it's true. I go to Italy every year, and the food is better.
Well, we're lucky in Vancouver because we have a lot of local produce. And actually, when I lived in Alberta, I had the same experience. The vegetables were not very tasty. Fruits were not very tasty. A lot of times it was because they were being trucked in from California, and I also lived in the mountains, so you know it was a bit of a remote place. And coming to Vancouver really reignited my appetite for vegetables, because the produce we have here is really stellar, and yet, you know, raw tomatoes, there's only a few that I've had here that have come close to the tomatoes that I've had in Italy in terms of flavor. But, you know, I think there's still a huge streak of traditionalism in Italian cuisine, even back in Italy. I mean, if you look at somebody like Massimo Bottura, who's a chef who is avant-garde, and he created like this lasagna, and you know how we all love the corner of the lasagna? Well, he actually created a dish where he only made the corner. So you could order the corner of the lasagna. And it created this huge outcry in Italy. Like, it was just, he got slammed for that. And so it's like, it's funny because Italy is a place that was a hotbed of innovation. Still, there's a lot of scientific and technical innovation happening there, but we don't hear about it. And also there's like this strain of like conservatism that says this is how you make it, and you cannot deviate from that. And so anybody who's trying to like push forward the boundaries tends to get jumped on.
This is the real secret of Italian civilization, to have in the same table the innovation and the taste of our tradition. That's what we call the Italian style of life.
And meanwhile, I have to say that it depends on where you are in Italy as well, right? And it depends on, it's even just the cities versus the smaller villages. And something else that I'm excited about is, you know, the best meal I had in Agrigento, which is where my family is from, and I was there, last time I was there was in the fall last year. The best meal I had was actually made in a restaurant called Ginger that is run by, the chef is originally from Senegal, and she's been in Sicily now for about 20 years. And she has this restaurant, and she's become quite famous. She's referred to as La Lady Chef, and she's won these awards for best couscous in Sicily. And I went to her restaurant, and it was so Sicilian, and at the same time, you know, she had brought in, I mean, it was couscous and it was a tagine, but she made this caponata, for example, where she used Sicilian honey, for example, from black olives. Like, she was using all of these local ingredients. It was caponata, but it was not like any caponata I'd ever had before. So I'm curious about, you know, where is La Lady Chef in, you know, in Puglia, for example, and where's a version of what she's doing elsewhere in Italy? So I think, so that's something that I'm excited about. And I wonder what that does to the tradition, to those more traditional aspects, and what it does to as well to the experimental impulses that also exist throughout the country.
Yeah.
The silence of a gastronomy. This.
Yes. We are hungry. We are thinking.
Yeah, I think. I think we are flying with our imagination.
We covered more or less. Yes, I'm checking. We covered the questions. So, okay. I have the opportunity to remember maybe the following events of the association, because we have the next Book and Biscotti open mic about it. Books and Biscotti is on September 11th at 5 p.m. Montreal time. The next Quattro Chiacchiere in Italiano is Wednesday 16th at 3 p.m. Montreal time. And the next webinar with l'Istituto Italiano di Cultura will be on October 8th. Very important, let's not forget the annual Venera Fazio poetry contest. You can send your poem for the 2021 contest of check for information on the website is AICW.ca. We invite you to have a look on the AICW Canada pages on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, because the association has this new young vibe. So to watch the videos, the video readings, for example, we started the videos for the Italian Heritage Month in June, as well as our members' poems and prose works, which we shared all along the spring and summer. So thanks everyone for attending. Lascio la parola al professore Darelli.
Thanks a lot, Giulia. First of all, I wanted to express my heartfelt gratitude to all our distinguished writers who took part in our webinar, and mainly Monica, Cristina, Francesca as moderator, Giulia, Domenico, and finally Jim. Just one suggestion for Cristina. Probably you know this wonderful book written by Vito Teti called Stone of Bread, published by the Wernica editions, where you can find wonderful pages on pane arso or the misery bread. Well, in this time we usually conclude with a formula: take care, stay safe. So see you next time, and mainly on the 8th of October with our next webinar organized by the Institute and the Association of Italian-Canadian Writers. Have a nice evening, afternoon, and see you soon.
Thank you. Bye. Arrivederci.
Bye, everybody.
Buonasera. Grazie.
Ciao.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Buona serata.
Ciao.